We'd like to start by acknowledging that Indigenous peoples have had and continue to have presence and deep connection with the lands on and near the Oak Ridges Moraine. These lands are the meeting place of two treaties, lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit and those of the Chippewas of Georgina Island, Rama, and Beausoleil, and of the Mississaugas of Albertville, Curve Lake, Hiawatha, and Scugog Island, the First Nations of the Williams Treaties. We'd like to thank them and other Indigenous peoples for sharing this land with us. We acknowledge this land and the people because the first step to reconciliation is recognizing Indigenous people and their inherent rights to the land, and that they've been subjected to colonial oppression and injustice, which continue today. We need to continue a lifelong journey of understanding how our collective past brought us to where we are today, and how to create a better future for our relationship with Indigenous peoples and for the land. We give our gratitude to Indigenous peoples on and near the Oak Ridges Moraine who have had a deep kinship of reciprocity with the land and have since time immemorial. We recognize that working together will strengthen our responsibility for the land and by including ecological traditional knowledge systems for an equitable and sustainable future. What does the Oak Ridges Moraine Land Trust do? So about 90% of the moraine is privately owned. So we work with willing landowners to help protect important wildlife habitat across the moraine. And we use a variety of tools to do this. So a land trust as an organization is a type of environmental nonprofit, which focuses on acquiring land and interests in land through things like conservation easements and through outright purchasing through like fee simple. We raise funds to purchase land and to have conservation easements, and we're required to protect the land in perpetuity. So we're not going to change our mind in 15 years and decide to build a condo on your property. So we protect the land in a variety of ways. We do ecological outreach work like this, like our webinar series, but we also go into schools and farmers markets and do guided walks and all sorts of great educational programming. We contribute to the federal government's goal of protecting 30% of lands by 2030. We support climate change resiliency. We have all sorts of great programming and activities which help connect people with nature. And we protect ecologically significant lands on and near the moraine. And like I said, we're required to do that forever. So one of the great tools that we have is the Federal Ecological Gifts Program. It's a great way for landowners to get a good tax break for either donating their land outright or for having an easement. And an easement is a cool arrangement. Say if you have a farm that's been in your family for a while and you still want to live there on that property and still want to farm part of it, you can have a conservation easement, and that will set aside part of the property for wildlife habitat, which will be protected, and you can continue to farm part of it and even continue to live there. So it's a really cool way to protect land, especially we all know the price of real estate and land and housing all around the GTA and Vaughan and that whole area. So it's a great cost-effective way to protect wildlife habitat. And of course, legacy giving is another way. With a lot of our funding comes to us. And right now we're working on a really cool project with a bird called the Kirtland's warbler. And they're a tiny songbird that spends their winters in the Bahamas, and they breed up around the Great Lakes. Most of them breed around Michigan, but we also have them in Wisconsin and in Ontario. And they're extremely picky about where they breed. They need to be in two species of pine trees, jack pine and red pine, that are between about 5 and 15 years of age. If they're too young or too old, they won't nest there. And the jack pines in particular regenerate through forest fires, which used to happen through controlled traditional burns that Indigenous peoples have had across Turtle Island. But those practices were suppressed with the arrival of European colonizers, and consequently, an entire habitat disappeared from the moraine and around the Great Lakes region. So right now we're restoring a site in Northumberland County near Ganaraska Forest to bring back this lost ecosystem. And so it's not just going to help the Kirtland's warbler. There's all sorts of other species that enjoy this pine oak savanna habitat. Things like the eastern meadowlark, bobolink, short-eared owl, monarch butterfly, hognose snake. So it's a really exciting project. And there's also the great opportunities to volunteer and collect seeds and things like that. And I'll put the link in the chat in just a second to our volunteer registration page. And we have a lot of great events coming up. We have to tie into this this webinar today. On Saturday, we have a Birds of the York Regional Forest walk at Nobleton Tract of the York Regional Forest. It looks like it might rain Saturday morning, so fingers crossed that the weather will hold out. If not, we'll reschedule and have it on another day. We have a Pride Month nature hike that I'm leading in June, as well as a Pride Month webinar to tie in with that to learn a little bit about nature. And you can visit the workshops and events page on our website to find out more. So before I hand it over to Aileen, I'll just give a little bio. So Aileen has a bachelor, a BSc in biology and over 2 decades of work in ecology and conservation. Through her work as the owner of a consulting company, she's worked with many of Southern Ontario's largest municipalities on public education and outreach programming for sustainable landscaping and other conservation-based initiatives. Eileen's been responsible for developing and delivering creative, ecology-based public outreach and educational concepts for various stakeholder groups throughout Southern Ontario for well over 20 years. Ms. Barclay has managed multiple natural resource management initiatives and has developed and implemented targeted engagement programs at community, municipal, and national levels. Aileen graduated with an honors BSc in biology from Trent University and has taken numerous ecology, restoration, marketing, advertising, and social psychology courses at college and professional institutions. She's an avid birder and a level 2 Ontario naturalist, and yeah, super knowledgeable birder, and you're in for a real treat to have her present with you today. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Aileen.
Thanks, Maxwell. I called myself a big bird nerd. Yeah, I've always loved nature, but birding just kind of got me hooked a bit. I did it a while back, and I just like to know what's around. And then about 10, 11 years ago, I was driving home, and a snowy owl flew over my house in Newmarket, and I'm in like at New Lock and Bayview, if anyone knows where that is. Pretty urban area. And I was so excited, and I thought, who do I report this to? Because this is not normal. So I went online and I found this thing called eBird. And that was my spark bird, I guess. I mean, I was into birds a bit before. I just didn't, it was a bit too hard to kind of figure them out when they were floating around. But that got my spark bird, and then I bought a giant lens so I could actually take pictures and see the birds and learn them. Yeah, and then it gets a bit addictive. Consider yourself warned. I have been called a pusher, like a drug dealer, but with birds. I've gotten a few people addicted, which means they're hooked and they spend a lot of time outdoors looking for birds, which is not a bad thing to be hooked on. There's definitely worse things. So I'll just start. Actually, I'm going to ask a question first for everyone watching. I'm just wondering what kind of bird level we're at out there. So I guess from a 1 to 10, a 10 being you can tell me exactly right now what your world, Ontario, and local bird list is at. And 1 being, I just figured out what a bird is. So if you guys want to let me know kind of where you're at in your birding in the chat and where you're from tonight. Anyone? I won't judge. A 3, all right. 5, all right. David's push. He's close. He's got a list. He just can't think of what the number is right now. All right. All right. Cool. All right. So I have to just excuse my little dog might try to pop in the screen. She's a bit excited with the spring weather, and I haven't walked her yet. Well, I walked her earlier, but not so. Anyway, so my hat, I worked for York Region Forestry for 10 years, leading hikes mainly at their haulage tract, but also north and Eldred King, and I've done a lot of work for them on that kind of education level. And now they're a partner with us with the Oak Ridges Marine Land Trust, so I'm kind of wearing 2 hats here. So the York Region Forest, when I started birding, and I would put it into eBird because I'm a strong believer in citizen science. The places like the MNR and some of the other organizations, they don't have the budget to be everywhere all the time. And so when people can contribute to that science through, you know, some level of rigorous, semi-rigorous scrutiny, excuse me, it really helps to feed what we know about our natural heritage around us. And so I started putting my lists in, and I think I'm now like the top birder for every forest because nobody was birding them, and there's some really cool stuff in there. Yeah, so I'll tell you about it if I can get this to go. There we go. So why birds? They're a vocal indicator of habitat and environment. So if you're out there trying to find mammals, they run from you. So you can maybe get the tracks and get an idea in the winter or in certain substrate if it's rained. Birds just sit there and yell what they are and where they are because each song is unique to the bird. So it's a great way to kind of assess what's going on in the habitat, and it's a little bit more exciting than plants, but I do love plants as well. So when we're looking up at a property to protect, we have to do an ecological assessment. And if I pull up the natural heritage information from the province, it's okay, but I can go on to eBird and I can look for, or iNaturalist is another one. I can look for verified reports and I can see what other species at risk are in the area. And so the more species at risk there are, more diversity, the higher score it'll get and the better chance we have to protect it. So, you know, I contribute to it and I use it professionally in my job. So that's a good way to do it. And they're an easy way to kind of figure that out. It's also like Pokemon Go, but real. It's kind of fun to go and discover it. And my bird nerd is coming out, but when you get like a really cool bird or a lifer, which is a bird you've never seen before, it's so exciting. And but when you scream, they fly away. So word of caution, because I've done that. I've been so excited, I went, woo! And every bird left. But it is really exciting to find a new bird and see a bird for the first time. If you're birding, please be ethical about it. When a bird flies away from you, you have disturbed it. And that happens everywhere we go. But if it's on a nest and you're continually, you know, following it around, it's not doing what it needs to do to survive and fight in the world that it's, you know, in the competition and finding food and raising young and not flying into a window and not getting eaten by a cat. So you try to be as least disturbance to them in their natural habitat as possible. Please do not trespass. Baiting. So this photo here of this great gray owl floated around like, oh, look how cute he is. He likes him. This bird was being so baited by photographers. And the person that he's looking at was one of the people that was baiting him. And then what happens is when they hear a car come, they get excited and they're like, oh, I'm going to get food. And they fly and sometimes get hit by cars. They get so used to people feeding them. Some of them up at the Ravenshoe Marsh were being baited one year, and they were so fat they were concerned they wouldn't be able to fly properly and get back home at the end of the winter. Don't harass them. There are people that will cut down trees. They will throw things at roosting owls to get them to fly so they can get a better shot. They will play calls. And when they're on nests, that's very stressful because you're like, hey, me and my family, we're going to raise here. I've declared my territory. I've got no competition. We're good to go. Someone comes and starts blaring a song over and over and again. The bird's like, I got to defend my territory. And there's been studies that show that it actually increases their stress levels for up to 24 hours afterwards, especially when they're on territory, which is the call. And don't chase. So a couple weeks ago, I was out, someone reported a short-eared owl, and I was looking for one and stopped to talk to this nice photographer lady and then kept going, and I could see it off in the distance. When I came back, her and 3 other photographers were flushing and chasing. They went off trail. They were running after this bird, trying to get pictures of it and flushing it. Oh, I was so mad. So, you know, that's stressful to the owl and to any bird. So just be ethical about it. It's a great way to do it. You don't have to leave the trail. Half the time you just sit and listen and look. So the pictures I'm going to show you, they're all mine. I have a massive lens. It gives me tendonitis. So I can zoom in. I also post edit, so you can see the pictures up above. That's kind of the original picture with my giant lens fully zoomed in. and then I crop it. I am not right up that close to the bird with my cell phone or with a small point and shoot click. Okay, I got some serious photography stuff on. I still don't know how to use it properly. It gives me tendonitis because it's so heavy, but I'm not getting too close. So I think people thought I was just really good with animals and they were tolerating me, but I don't. I'm really far away and I'm shooting far away and cropping. So how do we identify birds? It's really complex. The best way to learn birds is to go out and bird. But you can go out with someone that's willing to train you. Birders love to get other people involved because it validates their obsession, myself included. It's also a great way to spend time outside. But you want to look at locations. So location can be what continent you're on, because a lot of people will see something and say, oh, I think that's a blue-footed booby. Well, that's not even on this continent. They're down in Ecuador and stuff. So that's the first way to rule out, is it actually found in this area? And there's a great app called Merlin, which will tell you that. It also is the one you can listen to the birds, and it's not 100%. So, you know, sometimes it'll tell you that there's a bird that it's not in the area. So you want to make sure it can be found in the area and at that time. So, for instance, broadwing hawks, which are just starting to return now, people will report them in March, and they're nowhere to be found in March. They are way down south. And so, you know, they're probably not going to be here. Actually, they just won't. Occasionally, a weird bird will show up that's completely out of place. It's on the wrong continent. It's a super rarity, but it's you know, you'd be lucky to find one. By size, big, little, teeny, little, that. The basic colors, the size of their beak. So birds that have a very thin bill are usually insectivores. Ones that have a big fat bill are usually seed eaters. Some of the ones in between, you'll see, like, you know, your woodpecker, obviously, you know what that's for. But their bills and their beaks will tell you, kind of narrow it, especially when you get down to the little songbirds. Like this little one here, it's a golden crowned kinglet, and you can see his little mohawk going there. Cute little bird, very little, and they just pop around like popcorn. And then by their song. Some people have an ear for it. A lot of birds sound the same. Some of them have really good, what's called mnemonics. So right now you can hear the chickadees singing cheeseburger, 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 or the famous chickadee-dee, chickadee-dee-dee. The more dee-dee-dee-dee-dees they add, that's the warning sign. So if they're going chickadee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee, there's probably a hawk or maybe an owl or something that's around that they're alerting everyone to. Songs used to be hard. You'd have to really put your effort in to learn, but now you have handy Merlin, which will tell you likely what it is. Just a heads up, the Orioles are coming, and Merlin has a really bad habit of IDing it as tufted titmouse, I think it is, or Carolina wren, and it's just not. They're not around. Carolina wrens occasionally, but you know, it's not perfect. But it's a good way to teach you and start getting learning. So that's kind of what you're looking at. So we're going to start with the easy ones. So we have the cardinal, the grackle, which seem to be everywhere, and they're aggressive. I have seen them eating snakes, frogs, other baby birds. Actually, someone I know got some phenomenal shots of one eating a bat, which is kind of crazy. But they're abundant. I just realized now I forgot to change the label on it to common grackle, not American robin. So pardon me. Top right, we have American crows. They're everywhere. But ravens are around, and they're very similar until you learn their calls. One kind of caws, one croaks. From sound, their tail, when they're flying, one's a V, one's more C-shaped. So raven has a V in it, and it's a pointed tail, like a V. And crow is C, so it's more rounded. Ravens used to be only found way up north, but I actually have a pair breeding in my backyard, again in Newmarket, on a communication tower. So right now, we're on the 3rd Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas. What that is it's another citizen science project. It's done every 20 years for over a period of 5 years. The entire province, or most of it, is divided into 10-kilometer squares, and each 10-kilometer square has a person assigned to go out and find the highest breeding evidence they can of as many birds as they can, which is what I have to get caught up on this year for my one. And so over the years, they can track what's happening with birds. So it's a great long-term, Ontario-wide tracking of birds. They're like, if anyone doesn't know, canary in a coal mine, they used to take birds into the coal mine before they had advanced technology because the birds would be more susceptible to gases. And so if the canary died, the miners knew, uh-oh, something's bad, get out of here. So that's kind of the actual practical use of birds as an indicator. But, when we can track their populations, it tells us what's happening. So we've noticed that insectivores are all on the decline because we're using so many pesticides and we're losing our native plants and pollinators that it's now starting to affect the birds. So it's a great long-term tracking. Sadly, a lot of it tends to be that less and less every year, but the raven has expanded and blown up right across Ontario over the last three atlases. And they're now in Toronto. They used to be the northern bird. They're everywhere. And I'm so happy because they're my favorite bird, if you ever get a chance to hear them. They're now becoming quite common as well. I just didn't put a picture up. Blue jays, we all know the blue jays. Black-capped chickadees, the cuties. And for the York Region Forest specifically, barred owls are quite common. You won't see them a lot, but they are in almost every tract somewhere. And a lot of people that spend time in the York Region Forests up on the moraine, they'll see these guys. So they've got the black eyes, the flat face, and then the burring on their neck. And that's one right at the edge of North Tract. One day I was driving by and slammed on the brakes. So a few more easy ones. We have the red-winged blackbird, which are everywhere. We have our Baltimore oriole, which should be up soon. Our mourning doves, the great blue herons. When I'm out walking with my camera, people always go, oh, hey, there's a crane over there. And I'm like, oh, the blue heron's back. Someone described one to me. They're like, it was like a giant blue pterodactyl bird. It's a great blue heron. Down on the bottom left, we have the European starlings. They do all kinds of noises. They are mimics, so they will mimic eastern meadowlark. I've heard them do catbirds. They do a lot of birds. So sometimes Merlin will pick up them and say it's something when it's just a starling. So they are a mimic. And then the top right, which we'll slowly be seeing less of, are the little dark-eyed juncos, which I always think their bellies look like they've been dipped into vanilla icing. They are very, very common in the winter, but they go back up north soon. They're on their way to breed up way up north in the summer. But I think they're one of the most common birds in North America. So there's your common ones. Okay, so the first one we're going to get into, and these are ones you usually get a good shot at your feeders. They're common feeder birds. Is our finches. These aren't all the finches. I won't get into the crossbills and the white-winged and the red crossbills and all the winter finches. I'm just talking about our common finches, because if I went into all of these, I would never leave. Gloria's got her hand up. I don't know if you have a question.
Yeah, if anybody has a question, feel free to.
Bird pictures? Is everyone seeing the pictures?
Yeah, I'm seeing them on my computer. If anybody has a question, they can throw it in the chat if they want, and I can make sure that it gets answered. Looks like Nancy is seeing the finches.
So Leslie, you might want to log out and try and get back in. Sometimes that'll help. If anyone else isn't, let me know. That would have been a really boring call for a webinar with no pretty pictures.
Oh yeah, it looks like Dave could see them too, David.
Okay. So Leslie, maybe try logging out and coming back in. And then hopefully you can see them. If not, we are recording it. Hopefully with the pictures in it.
Yeah, it's recording fine here.
Okay. All right. So finches, that your bird feeder. You have what everyone knows is the American goldfinch, or yellow finches, people call them. And they fly. They say potato chip, and dip as they fly. And they'll change to a totally different, very dull color. So the female's up in the top right there. And then the male is the bright vivid one, but the males will completely change plumage for the winter when they're not breeding. And they're very, very common. They breed much later on in the year. They're one of the probably the most vegetarian-ish bird that we have. They will survive on seeds most of the year, and rarely will they actually like a protein, meaning bugs, or some form of it, until the babies are born. So there's other birds that will eat a lot of seeds too, but they usually incorporate a bit more protein. But the finches are the most vegetarian-ism-ish ones out there. I don't know what the word is. The difference between the purple finch and the house finch. This is one that people are always asking. So the way I remember it is the purple finch are raspberry colored and the house finch are strawberry jam colored. That helps. You can also see that on the house finch, there's a brown streaking on the side on the lower flanks of the bird. And on the purple finch, you don't see that streaking, that heavy streaking. On the female purple finch, which is the bottom left, you'll see they have that really bright eyebrow and very clean kind of brown and white streaks. And then I don't have a really good picture of a finch, but on the one where they're at the feeder, you can see that the female house finch won't have that bright white eyebrow or supercilium or super, I always get that word wrong. I'm not a technical birder. I'm like their eyebrows, their armpits, their butts instead of the formal terms. So it's just the way my mind works. It makes more sense. But sometimes I'll come out with a term. So if I'm offending anyone by my non-technical terms, I apologize. Our woodpeckers. There's one that's not on here, which is the red-headed woodpecker. That's now been upgraded to endangered. It has been seen in the York Region forests. I have not seen it there. I haven't seen one since Point Peely because I see them down there. They are becoming less and less common and more rare. And as I said, they've just been upgraded to endangered. So the most common one's the one in the middle, the little downy woodpecker. And then you'll notice in the top left is the hairy woodpecker. They look very much alike. So how you tell the difference on them, for the most part, is the bill length. So on the hairy, the bill is almost as long as their head is. On the downy, it's about half as long as their head is. Of course, you don't always get a good chance to see it. Sometimes, or most of the time, on the downy woodpecker, on their outer feathers, they're white, they'll have a little black barring, but that's not always true. So the bill length, if it's the same distance, like if their head from the back of their head to the front of their head is an inch wide, their bill is an inch. Where a downy, if it's an inch wide, it may be half an inch, their bill. Hairies tend to be bigger, but size in the field is subjective and it's really hard to see. Years ago, I was doing Christmas bird count. And we saw what we thought were a bunch of wild turkeys in a tree. We were coming up over the hill, the sun was rising up, and I was with some really experienced birders. I was still pretty new to it at the time. We thought they were wild turkeys. We got closer, we realized they were mourning doves. That's a huge size difference. And it was the perspective, kind of like when the moon comes up over, first thing over the horizon, it looks massive, but when it's up in the air, it looks small. So you have to watch with size. It's not always a good ID feature. The yellow-bellied sapsucker, that's on the left, the middle left there. If you ever see a tree, it's got all these little woodpecker holes in lines. They're just like tons and tons of teeny little holes. That's usually a sapsucker. And so they knock and the sap leaks out. They will eat the sap, but they'll also eat the bugs that get attracted to the sugary sap. And they use it as kind of like a trap. So it's like sugar-coated bugs. So good. How to tell them is if you notice on the wing, there's a very white bar that kind of comes down the edge of their wing. Where's my pointer? There we go. So you can see this bar here. That's the really good ID feature for them. If you can see that white bar, that's a sapsucker. And you'll notice that the hairy and the downy don't have that clean white bar. Most of the time they'll have a bit of head, like red on their head or in their throat, but not always. There's some that just don't have it. They're either immature males or females or just weird colored variations. Top right, we have our red-bellied woodpecker, but he has a red head. So I guess they gave the name out first to the red-headed. And then this one came along and I went, ugh, shoot, what do we call this one? Well, look, he's got a little bit of yellow on his belly or orange. Let's call him a red belly. And a lot of people tell me they see red-headed woodpeckers, but it's actually a red belly. The red head would have a whole red, solid black, solid white, no mottling like this one. That's the red-bellied, and they sound a bit like a tree frog when they call it. A very neat call. Down below that is the northern flicker. That is a woodpecker as well, but they tend to spend a lot of time on the ground looking for ants and stuff. When they fly, you'll see that the top of their tail, their rump, is white. And they go, very, very loud. And then the big one we have, the pileated woodpecker, which is like, I don't know if you can see my hands, maybe just under a foot tall or long. They are cool. They build massive holes in trees. So in the winter, rather than going around and trying to find dormant ants or bugs, they will find a tree that has carpenter ants in it, and they're like, aha, you're in there. I'm just going to eat here all winter. And so they will then proceed to like completely make this massive hole to get at that carpenter ant as they're dormant, because they don't hear them as well under in the wood as they would in the summer when the bugs are active. So sometimes you'll see these huge honking massive holes. I was out with my friend and her son, and I'm like, that's so big. I bet we could fit your son in there. And she laughed. I said, no, seriously, can we? Didn't go over well. He was all for it, but she was like, I don't want to stick my son in a tree. Oh, okay, fine. That would have been such a cool picture, but they're that big, the holes sometimes. Anyone need a babysitter? I love these webinars because I just assume everyone's laughing at my jokes. Now, where do I get the, come on. There we go. Okay, now we're into the thrushes. Some of them are, as you can tell by the pictures, are super easy to ID, and some of them all look the same. So, the top right, we have the veery. They're the size of a robin because a robin's a thrush, but they have a very barely marked chest, and they're a nice, like kind of orangey, rusty red color, light rusty. They have a very cool call, which I'm completely gapping at. This is what happens every spring. I'm like, oh, I got to remember all the calls again. They're forested birds. If you've ever golfed at, I think it's Spring Lakes there, they're everywhere there. But they're in the forest. You often see them on the ground. A lot of thrushes like to spend time on the ground, kicking up the leaves and rooting for bugs and stuff. Bluebirds, you know a bluebird when you see it. It's a bluebird with the right. The males have that beautiful red rusty chest, and the females just have a faint version of this one. If you go to Bender Graves, the off-leash dog park, that is north of Davis Drive on McCowan, you'll see these guys there. They have the boxes. They do nest in cavities. They were at one point threatened, but there was this big effort to put out bluebird boxes for them, and they're made a remarkable comeback, and they're quite common. Maxwell and I were so excited at the window 2 weeks ago because we had bird boxes, and there was a couple that were checking out our bird box for a good 10 minutes. We were so excited, but they haven't been back yet. The Swainson's thrush, the robin, I'll go to the robin because everyone knows the robin. The males have that much darker chest than the females. They are everywhere right now. Their populations are doing so well because of common buckthorn, which is an invasive species, but these guys seem to like it. They will stick around all winter. You just won't see them as much. So everyone says, oh, the robins are back, spring's coming, but they'll often overwinter in flocks, but they'll stay in forests like the York Region forests. So you won't see them as you will in the summer, on your lawn and calling at 3 in the morning. Yeah, so those are your really obvious ones. Now you get into the other ones that all look the same. And when they're down in a dark shadow of forest and they're fluttering around, oh, what are you? So the first one we'll start with, which is on your left, is your Swainson's thrush. Very pretty for the kind of dull thrushes, but I think they're very pretty. You'll notice they have a really, really obvious eye ring, and it's called a buffy. So it's not white, it's like buffy colored. And their chest, you can kind of see that tan color going into their neck and chest. And that's kind of the indicative of a Swainson's thrush, is that buffy color, the big bright eye ring, and that kind of tan buffered face into their chest. Right below it, these are a lot less common. This is a gray cheek thrush. Almost looks the same, except you can kind of see that they don't have that tan coloring in their neck and throat. They have a gray cheek. That's why they're named it, but that's not always clear to see. But if you kind of see the differences, one on top of the other, that the one has that buffy color and then the gray cheek doesn't. They usually move through. They don't usually breed in the area. I believe Swainson's breed Algonquin Park in north, but they're not. They're just migrants, so you'll see them passing through in the spring and the fall. To go over the top right, these are two that do nest locally. North Tract actually has a really good population of breeding hermit thrush and wood thrush. You'll notice the two exclamation marks on the wood thrush, and you'll see that on a few of these pictures. These are species at risk, which means that they are, their populations are plummeting, they're causing concern. Without intervention, they risk becoming either endangered or extinct. And sadly, with the wood thrush, that is the case. They are a ground nesting bird, so they are highly susceptible to things like wild turkeys, which are now becoming a little bit of a problem, off-leash dogs and cats. Any kind of cleaning of the forest where they don't have good undergrowth of native species, that's a problem for them as well, loss of habitat. And then hermit thrush, they're fine so far. You'll see on their tail, they've got a rusty colored tail. That's their kind of main ID feature. They don't have that buffy look that the Swainsons do. They don't have that big eye ring. They have a little bit of an eye ring, but it's not as obvious. And they have that nice rusty tail. The wood thrush is one of my, I just love hearing it. I used to play it as like a wake-up call, like my alarm. It's a flute-like call, and I'm going to see if I can play it because I can't figure out how to get sound to work. It's mixed on Zoom. So I'm going to just play it on my cell phone and hold it up to the microphone and hope that works. Oh, and then sorry. Hold on. Okay, that was my dog. That was not the wood thrush. Can you guys hear that? Oh, great. Something like a fluty call. And for me, I hear that call and I'm immediately taken to a warm summer day in the forest. I'll be swatting mosquitoes. I love hearing that call. Hermit thrush I think it's very similar. I often have to stop and double check which one's calling. So that is nice. Kind of like a wood thrush with a cold. I did take the singing lessons. But both of them, when they call, they echo through the forest, and it's phenomenal. So those are the thrush. They're a bit more challenging. Again, I've explained why, but they on the ground. But these are the key differences. I didn't talk about the wood thrush difference, but if you look at its chest, the streaks are much more defined, the dark streaks against the white, and they have that funky kind of, I don't even know what color you call it, like rusty cap head. So, you know, if you look at the Veery, it's got the same coloring as the head, but it doesn't have that dark streaking and spots on the chest. The hermit thrush, that coloring is more in the tail, and again, it lacks that dark chest. Gray cheek doesn't even come close to that coloration, same with Swainson's. So there's these subtle differences that'll help you, if you can get a good look at them, the differences between these guys. And they're all over the York Region forests, with the Swainson and gray cheek just being all over the place, but in the migration periods. Okay, barn swallows. So another place, or sorry, swallows, I guess in general. Bender grays again. The tree swallows tend to fight the bluebirds for the boxes. They're all over the place. These are more open area birds because they're insectivores and they're very dramatic. They're the acrobats of the sky. You see here that we have two. The barn swallow's just been downgraded, so its populations are actually doing better. So it's been, I don't know if it's right off the species at species at risk list, or if it's just been downgraded. I'd have to double check that. But these are the ones that are like at horse farms everywhere. They have a very long forked tail, and they're diving all over. They have that rusty face. The bank swallow on the top left and the northern rough-winged swallow on the bottom left look very similar. Now, it's really hard when these, even me, you know, I've been birding for a long time now. When they're flying all around, it's really hard to get a good look at these two, and they look very similar. You'll see that the northern rough-wing, they have kind of some dark across their chest, but the bank swallow has a very defined necklace. Seems like obvious, but when they're going a mile a minute, going whoosh, 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 diving all over the place, it's not always easy. In the middle, we have our tree swallow, which is blue on the outside, iridescent blue, and then pure white underneath. They have a little bit of a forked tail, but it's more squared off and just kind of pointed edged. It's not quite the forked tail of the barn swallow. And even in the bank swallow, you can see that forked tail, but it's not that long tail. So that's kind of how you tell those apart. One I don't have on here is a cliff swallow. It kind of looks like a barn swallow, but with a big white forehead. And its tail won't be as long. They will nest in cavities for some of them. Bank swallows, if there's an exposed dirt face, like an eroded bank, which is how they got their name, or what happens to them and why they're in trouble is that construction companies or something, when they're digging, will leave like a big, they'll dig into a big pile of dirt, and there'll be exposed dirt, and it's facing southwest, southeast, south. All of a sudden there's a colony of bank swallows. Then they go and do another dig, and the whole colony's gone. So habitat, like blatant destruction, and also insect populations declining are cause for concern for these guys. Now this is where it gets the flycatchers. Guess what they do? They eat flies. The yellow-bellied flycatcher, he's one you're not going to see in the migration, but most birds, when they look straight at the camera, they look angry, except for the yellow-bellied flycatcher. It's the only bird I've had that looks straight at the camera, and I don't get a weird-looking picture. I get, oh my gosh, it's just as cute. It's a cute little bird, but you can see they all look very similar, with the exception of the big old gray-crested. And when they're flying around really quickly, it's hard to tell them apart. Their calls are also very similar, but in the case of the alder and wild willow flycatcher, they can't be ID'd apart just by looking at them. If you don't hear them call, you don't know which one it is. They are that much alike. They actually were considered the same species with two calls, and then they did genetics and realized they're actually separate species that look identical, but they have two different calls. So the alder flycatcher says, free beer, free beer. I like him. He's A, alder. That's how I remember. And willow kind of does a Fitzboo, Fitzboo. And that's, I just know it's not free beer. So their calls are how you distinguish them. The phoebe, that one is the first one. They're already back. They'll nest all over the place. They're quite common. They're probably the most common one we have. And they say their name, Phoebe, Phoebe. So sometimes birds' names are based on what they say. The great crested flycatcher, they're about twice the size of the other ones. They are so loud, and they have a very loud creep, creep. I'm doing a really bad impression, but creep, creep. And they have that spiked hair, the yellow belly, and the gray chest. Quite a good looking bird. The two in the middle, you see, have those exclamation marks again, sadly, and these are two of our species at risk. The olive-sided flycatcher being much, much, much less common than the peewee. I'm still not sure why the peewee's on the list, because they seem to be everywhere. The peewee says its name, peewee, peewee, not Phoebe, Phoebe. So they sound similar. One's peewee, one's Phoebe. The olive-sided flycatcher, which you can see looks quite similar to the peewee, but if you notice that they have these, yeah, it has basically a dark, they call it a dark vest on. So very, very dark vest. Now you can see there's a bit of dark on the peewee, and sometimes the juveniles will be a bit darker, but it's a very defined dark vest on that flycatcher. Now the olive-sided flycatcher is another one of my favorites because of its call, and it says quick 3 beers, quick 3 beers. That's the phonetics for it. They're not very common, but I do see them quite a bit at North Tract. They are classic for hanging out in the top of a dead tree, and they fly out, fly back. All flycatchers kind of do that, fly out and fly back. But olive-sided flycatchers always do it from a dead tree. It seems like that's anytime I've ever seen one, it's on top of a dead tree. Peewees will do it, but they'll do it from regular branch. Phoebes, they all kind of do that, but the flycatchers are notorious for doing it off of the top of a dead tree. So that's your flycatchers. The Acadian, which isn't on here, is endangered. I've seen one once ever. We did have one reported this past summer at one of our properties, and they go pizza, pizza, pizza. It's actually not like flycatchers when they just sing about beer and pizza. Like, it's kind of cool. They're very, very rare. At one pitch of it, it's horrible. And if you see one, report it but hide the location because everyone will rush to it, and you get those people playing calls, and it'll stress it out. All right, now we're getting into the good, colorful. These are the warblers. They call them the jewels of the forest. I was over visiting relatives in Scotland, and of course I went birding. And they found out from Canada, oh, you guys get the lovely wood warblers. Oh, I got to come there and see them. These guys are notorious for being, not in the tropics. They are absolutely beautiful up here. And they come up from the tropics. So they're all down south. And then they make this massive migration up here to capitalize on all those spring bugs, breed up here. As soon as the babies can fly, they're like, back they go. So the first few are trickling in. The weeks of like May, the second and third week of May in York and in the forest will probably be the peak migration for all these guys. Then some of them will nest here, some of them will keep going north and nest, and then they're already heading back down in August. So it's a quick visit, beautiful, and they completely change colors on the way back down. I'll talk about that. So we've got a black and white warbler. If anyone knows what a nuthatch is, which I realize I don't have in this slide, they tend to run up and down trees like a nuthatch, and they are black and white, so that's an easy one. The one in the middle, oh, he's stunning. These are Blackburnians. They do breed in the York Region forests. They call them fire throats. They're just a stunning bird. Very, very vivid, yellowy red and the dark black. They're just incredible. Chestnut-sided breed all over the forest, and their call is please, please, please to meet ya. Please, please, please to meet ya. That's kind of the tone of their call. Yellow warblers sometimes sound like them, and that's the bottom right. These are everywhere. These are the most common warbler that we get breeding around here. Beautiful bright yellow with like solid yellow with that red streaking, and their call is sweet, sweet, I'm so sweet. Sweet, sweet, I'm so sweet. Sometimes they go sweet, sweet, I'm so friggin' sweet, and they put in a few extra words in there. But sweet, sweet, I'm so sweet. And you'll hear them like, anywhere where there's shrubs and a stream or something, they'll be there. I go to Peely usually every year to get the migration down there because it's concentrated because there's nowhere else for the birds to go. So they make the huge flight overnight over the lake, and the first piece of land they get to are these points that stick out. So Tommy Thompson Point Park, Long Point, Peely. It's got more bird species there than anywhere in Canada recorded. And the birds are everywhere. And by the end of the day, you're like, oh God, it's another yellow warbler. Like you're at 200 for the day. Everywhere. But super cute and sweet and beautiful colored. The black-throated blue warbler, they do breed around here. Their call is I am lazy, I am lazy, buzz, 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 buzz. On the other side, mourning warblers, they are breeding around in the forest, but they're a little bit less obvious. They have a neat call that's, oh gosh, what's the call now? Maxwell, what is it again? It's like, cheery, 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 choo. Cheery, 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 choo.
I think that's right.
Yeah, they have two calls, and the second call stumped me because they don't use that often. But a neat blue head, black throat, bright yellow, and then like a kind of rusty brown back wings and stuff. Justin-sided warbler, you can see why he's called that, but yeah, beautiful. Some more of the beautiful gems. We have the yellow rump warbler. So they're the first ones back and the last ones to go. So they're back. Same with the pine warblers. They're our early ones. The yellow rump warbler is got a yellow rump. So their nickname is butterbutt. So they're butterbutts. They also have yellow in the armpits and the black mask. Pine warblers are quite variable. They tend to sing up on the tops of pines, so they're aptly named, and they do breed around here, and especially in the regional forest with all those pine trees. They tend to have kind of that blurry white wing bar, and then they have that black line that goes through their eyes, but they can be very variable. They have a trill call that sounds very much like a chipping sparrow, which are everywhere, but I find it has a bit of an arc to a call. Where the chipping sparrow is kind of a flat chip, 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 chip. Pine warblers kind of goes up and down just slightly. But they sound very similar. The blue wing warbler, you know, in Peely, if someone reports a blue wing warbler, everybody runs to go see it, and I'm like, oh my God, they're everywhere. They like kind of edgy, early successional type forests, and so they do breed at oh, where are they? They're in a few places at North Tract. I think they're at Happy Valley. I think I don't know if they're at Bender Graves, but they're quite common in North. You have to have a call. They're not easy to see. Magnolia warbler. This is probably one of my favorites. So it's got that gray. If you remember what the Kirtland warbler looked like, which are my earrings, I don't know if you can see them. But this has that necklace with, they call it the dangling necklace. So it has that black one with these long things like streaks coming down. The white wing bars, the gray on top, and the black mask, but that very defined long black necklace dragging down. Where a prairie would be kind of similar, but it wouldn't have the gray and the white so much on it. I'm not even going to look at prairie because I've seen one once ever. They're so rare and they're not around here. And then the other one would be a Canada, which I'll show you the difference. And then down at the bottom is the common yellowthroat, because they are everywhere. They are swampy birds. You usually find them near or in wetlands or wet areas. And again, their call. Why am I forgetting them all? This is what happens. It's very, oh, witchity, 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 witch. Witchity, 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 witch. And or sometimes they'll shake it up. Or sometimes they do one that freaked me out the first time I heard it, because it sounds like it's saying, come over here, come over here, come over here. And why is the bird inviting me over? And then the other one, an alder was calling, going, free beer. And I'm like, I should go. Something's up. They both had nothing to offer. But you'll hear them quite a bit, and they will stick around a bit later on in the fall as well. Okay, these ones tend to, let's see, some of them will pass through. So the Cape May, the Tennessee, the Bay-breasted will all pass through. So they're just in the migratory seasons. Cape May, what a stunner, like red and black and yellow and this cool, like rusty face. Same with the Bay-breasted warbler, like all these vibrant colors. The Tennessee warbler's got a blue head with the eye ring and white underneath, and you'll see that it's got yellow on the top of the rump or the top of their butt, kind of at the top of their tail there. And that's a good feature in this fall because they all look different in the fall, except for black and white. Canada warbler is a species at risk. I think this might be one of my favorites to find. So they've got these giant eye rings. They call them, like they say, they're wearing spectacles. And you can see he's got a bit of a necklace, but it doesn't drag all the way down. It's a short necklace versus the long one of the magnolia. And he doesn't have all the bright white on the wings. That's a Canada warbler. We had a first record at one of our nature reserves of one, and I think it was the first one for York region for the breeding bird atlas. They're not commonly breeding down here. They like a lot of really, really shrubby undergrowth. And so they're you know, all the forests here that we have, they don't have that good healthy undergrowth because they're all plantation forests. They're just not happy down here, but there's a few around. They're just very uncommon. This is the one when I finally saw one, I screamed and scared it away because I was so excited. It happened. The one on the right's quite common. They do breed down here. It's a very plain looking bird. It's still pretty, but compared to some of these flashy ones, yeah, he kind of takes the back seat in the flashy department. So very plain. There's no real. There's a bit of an eye ring, but no white wing bars. There's no dark markings. There's no white marks on their heads. It's basically a gray head, yellow body, and that Nashville. Still pretty. And notice their bills are all that sharp, thin for catching bugs. When I talked about bill size, more warblers. There's so many of them. Orange crowned. It's not a common one. A very bland looking bird, but when it does get up like excited or whatever, it has a little orange spike, that kind of mohawk that sticks up. The Nashville does too, but you'll notice that he doesn't have that kind of two-colored neck to body. He's kind of all bland one color. Little black eye ring, and you'll notice that the underside of his tail, so his butt, is yellow, where the Nashville is white. So in the fall they look almost identical, and that's how you tell the difference. That's like advanced birding. Fall warblers are crazy. Palm warblers, an early bird, so they're starting to be reported. Nice bright red head, yellow everywhere. They always pump their tails. They tend to be on the ground and they're always pumping their tails. Pump, pump, pump. Their tails are always going up and down. The golden wing warbler, that's another species at risk. Stunning bird, like just so sharp in color, like the black and the orange, or sort of the yellow and the gray. Another one, I'm not sure all the reasons why they're in trouble, but they are an insectivore. They like a certain edge species. But what's happening is the golden wing and on the last one, the blue wing warbler are intermixing. And so when you hear the golden wing call, you don't know if it's actually a golden wing, a blue wing, or a hybrid until you see the bird. And so this particular picture I took last year at another one of our nature reserves. And for the last 5 years, every time I go there, there's a blue wing warbler that sits in this one area and sings every time. So I thought, and I just finished doing a survey up at Cardinalvar, and we were having this discussion, and I said, okay, my theory is when one bird does another one's call, it'll revert and do the other one. Now my dog's playing. Ruby, stop it. Excuse me. Stop. Just lie down. Lie down. Lie down. Sorry. She's cute. She gets away with it. And so my theory is, anyways, that they'll do the regular call, they'll flip into the other bird's call, then they'll go back to the regular. But I'm like, it's just a theory. So I get there and I hear a golden wing calling, and I'm like, that blows my theory because it's a blue wing. It's always there. Why is it just doing the golden wing warbler call? Sure enough, out pops the golden wing warbler, and then the blue wing warbler is nearby calling. So they will sometimes play. They also have breeds, hybrids of the two, which are the Brewsters and the, Maxwell, help me with this one. There's
Lawrence's.
Lawrence and Brewster, and I don't know how you tell the two apart. One looks like one looks like the other, but they're hybrids of golden wing and blue wing. That was complicated, eh? Bottom right is the black-billed warbler that kind of looks like a chickadee. But it is indeed a warbler, and they're quite uncommon. They're usually later on. They'll kind of be one of the last warblers through. And then the top right is the black-throated green warbler. It's not really green, but I think the yellow name was taken. These guys do breed locally in the York Region forests, and they usually hear them once they're on territory because they're way up high in the trees. And they go, trees, trees, murmuring trees, 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 murmuring trees. And they have another one, which is not the right phonics, but I learned it because I had a dog named Okie, and it's Okie, 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 Doodle, Okie, 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 Doodle, because that's what I call them. So, sometimes learning their calls by a saying helps, and That's kind of theirs and my personal one for them. But they call a lot, and they're very common in deciduous mixed forests. So that's a lot of warblers. This is what happens in the fall. It's so hard. So this stunning one on the left completely changes to the one on the right, which is somewhat what the female looks like. It's actually probably a female, and I'm just using it as an example, but all the bright, beautiful colors fade. They stop calling, they tend to all look the same. And it's very challenging. That's a different webinar altogether. It's multiple ones. This is the lovely, stunning, so obvious magnolia on the left. And on the right is what it turns into. It's also what the female looks like. So everything fades. Yeah, and like things like the black-billed, they like they're black and white, they turn almost yellow in the fall. Everything changes color. That's start with the really obvious bright colored ones in the spring. All right, sparrows. They tend to be earlier arrivals. They're out in the open a bit more, but they all look the same somewhat until you get a good close-up picture of them. So the most common one, which is the first one back, and they will even overwinter, same with the right-throated sparrow, is our song sparrow. They're everywhere, and they're just calling constantly. You can tell because they always have that black, what they call the malar stripes, so the black kind of mustache coming down, the dark streaks coming down from either side of the corners of their bill, and a heavy streaked breast, and then the stripes on the head. The only one that is very similar to them, which is very uncommon, is called a, oh gosh, I'm forgetting everything today, Lincoln sparrow. But their streaking is very clean, and they have a very defined buffy vest on. And those malar stripes will be more buffy colored. But song sparrows are everywhere. Down at the bottom, these are things you'll find in fields. They like kind of open areas. The Savannah sparrow, they have a very buzz-like call. It starts out like a song sparrow and kind of buzzes at the end. But you can see that they have the yellow eye makeup on. They have like yellow eyeshadow on, and that's kind of the main feature of these guys. So streaky with that yellow eyeshadow. You'll see that white-throated sparrow also has yellow eyeshadow on, but he's got a white throat. That's his name. And the streaking, you don't get the streaking on the chest. Now, white-throated sparrows, they're typically known as a cottage bird, but they do breed in the York Region forests, and you will hear them calling, if I can get this to play. They have, oh, Canada, 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 Canada. Oh, Canada, Canada, Canada. That's their calls, and they're calling right now, actually, when they're migrating. Really Canada. In the States, they call it Mr. Peabody, 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 Peabody. But I guess we're trying to make it a bit more patriotic. Oh, Canada, Canada, Canada. White crown sparrows. These are the cool dudes with the neat racing helmet on. Very, like, defined black and white stripes on their head. And clean everywhere else, like no streaking or anything. These guys, they don't tend to breed around here. They just move through in migration. What's really neat is there's a population that, for some reason, overwinters in the Bradford Marsh and has done so for decades. And they are not an overwintering bird. Like one or two will show up. Every year, there's a fairly healthy population of white-crowned sparrows that stay around all winter in the Bradford Marsh. At feeders, anytime you find a feeder, if you wait, usually you find a white-crowned sparrow nearby. So kind of a neat local thing. I don't really see reports of them that frequently overwintering anywhere, so I don't know what's going on there. The one in the middle, the fox sparrow, is another one that's just a transit, like just in migration. It's a bigger one, much heavier streaking, but like reddish streaking. So it stands out when you see it. They're usually in a flock. They're always on the ground kicking. They kick, 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 and feed. Kick, kick, kick. So, you know, if you're in a forested area and it's late fall and you're hearing like something scraping through the leaves, there's a good chance it's a fox sparrow. They're really loud. They're just like, they make such a racket. And they're notably bigger. So those are the ones. There's also American tree swallows. They look somewhat, I'm trying to think of which one they look like most. Kind of like a song sparrow with a black dot in the middle, but they have a bicolored bill, like you can kind of see in the fox sparrow. They're only down for the winter. So I left them out. I think, yes. More sparrows. So our grasshopper sparrow, this is not a common bird. They're a grassland bird. They're a species at risk. They have a very buzz, buzz, buzz call. It sounds like an insect or a grasshopper, which is why it got its name. But they are breeding. They had one point before they planted all the trees, they had an amazing population at Bender Graves. I went there and I think we had something like 9 singing males, which means there's usually about the same or more females around and babies. If you know Bender Graves, the area they just burned yesterday, the fenced in grassland area, there's 2 or 3 species or 2 or 3 in there breeding, and you can hear them calling. They don't have the usual kind of head slope to a bill. They kind of, their whole head points into the bill, kind of like a cone head. They also have the yellow lores, but they have a very obvious eye ring and that really weird pointed cone head face. That's what I call them. Vesper sparrows, for some reason, they seem to like hanging around horse farms. Anytime I hear them, there's a horse farm nearby. They're not that common. They have a very, very big eye ring. And if you can see on their shoulder, they have a bit of chestnut colored. Sparrows are tough. They all look the same. The one down below, which I forgot to label, is a clay colored sparrow. And they are like, everyone gets so excited when they find one because they're not very common. They nest in areas that are just starting to get forested, kind of similar to Kirtland's in their requirement for a certain age of trees, but not as dense as Kirtland's likes them. They don't have the streaking of the breast. They have that white malar stripe with an eye ring, and you can see there's a black line that comes up to the back of their eye, but doesn't carry through to the bill. Where on a chipping sparrow, a juvenile chipping sparrow looks exactly like a clay colored, except that the black line continues right through their eye to their bill. Clay colored, they used to be at Cothra, but the trees are growing in, so there's less of them. They're starting to show up at Bender Graves because the trees are at that height. So I think 2 years ago there was 1 there. Last year there was 5 or 6. And I'd say this year you'd see 5 or 6 or more. And again, they have a very buzzy insect call, similar to grasshopper. But they'll start to show up more. One of our protected private properties, a conservation easement, they had a huge cattle field and they planted it with trees. And I went there and I had, can't remember how many, but it was the record for Southern Ontario. No one had ever seen that many clay-colored sparrows in one spot. Now there's less every year now because the trees hit a certain height and they move on to the next one. But very specific, very fun to hear, not very common. Chipping sparrows are everywhere. They're in neighborhoods. They're probably out back calling right now. Rusty head, the black line, and that kind of trill, very long trill of chips. It blurs together. Top right is a field sparrow. Guess where they hang out? In fields. But yesterday we had one, first time I've ever seen one, at our feeder at work all day long, stuffing his face, chasing all the other birds, dominating the feeder and eating his face off till I left it. Like he was still there when I left at 6:30. They have that really, it's like they're wearing lipstick, that pink bill, a really obvious white eye ring, and no streaking. And then they kind of have that kind of streaks, but not as defined on their heads. It's kind of like they've got sideburns and their rusty hair. And they sing, their song sounds like a ball that bounces and gets bounce. Like it, balls kind of bounce themselves out. I'll see if I can get it to play. I don't know if you guys can hear me playing these calls. I'm assuming you can. And Maxwell, I'm assuming if you can't, you would let me know so I don't waste my time. It's like a ball that bounces and runs out of steam. All right, just for fun, I will play you. Oh, I didn't. There, the clay colored sparrow, because that's kind of cool. That's it. Sounds like an insect. So 2 buzzes, and then the grasshopper is very similar. So there's a little tick, 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 tick at the beginning, which you can't always hear, and then a single buzz.
Yeah, some of them are playing for some reason and other ones aren't. Like we heard the clay color pretty clearly.
Can you hear this?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, it's like a very quiet ting, ting, ting. Zzz. I'm just holding my phone up because that's how I roll with technology right now. That's the Vesper, and I find it has a mix of all. It starts out like the field sparrow bounce, then moves into the song sparrow, then kind of buzzes out at the end. But they're all kind of buzzy calls. So sparrows are challenging, but they're kind of fun. They're everywhere, and they're neat little habitat. Tend to be open space. Okay, so now we're moving to the big guys, the predators up there in the sky. I don't know how to get this red mark off my screen, but anyway, so hawks are difficult, but if you can get an idea of kind of the shape, it helps you narrow it down to the groups. So accipiters, they are the forest hunters. So they have that very, very long tail, which acts like a rudder and helps them navigate through forests. It also helps them navigate with city life. And so Cooper's hawk, which is one of our accipiters, have adapted really well to feeding with bird feeders. Sharp-shinned hawks, there's always people, is this a sharp-shin or a Cooper's? It's this ongoing, like, what is it? Because they look so much alike. Sharp-shin, slightly smaller, but again, in field, size is subjective, and the bigger sharp-shin can overlap in size with the smaller Coopers. So there's some field markings, but they're very, very similar. I won't get into it. But the accipiters have that really, really long tail for navigating. The one other accipiter we get is the goshawk, which is like my favorite raptor. It's, you see crows attacking hawks. Well, when there's a goshawk, the crows are like, get out of the way, run. They don't even bother. First time I found one, I'm like, why are the crows flying away from a raptor? And then I realized what it was. They are like the badasses of the forest. They are forest birds. They're the ones that sometimes they'll close trails because if they're nesting nearby, they'll actually reportedly scalp people. It was one particular couple in New York State got scalped by one because they were too close to the nest and they weren't taking the warnings, and they had to get actually ended up in the hospital because it just scalped them. I did hear that someone got hit and injured at one of the York Region forests a couple years ago because there's a nesting goshawk in there, and I won't say which one. But something's coming at you, and it's got talons, and it's mad, leave. Cover your head and leave. Talons can do damage. Goshawks are not very common, but the Coopers are super common, and sharp-shin are fairly common, but you're more likely to find them in the forest. But again, that long, long tail. Bootios, those are soaring birds. So they tend to have a shorter tail and wide, big wings because they hover and dive. Where the accipiters chase, they hover and dive. So that's your red-tailed hawk, which are the most common ones. But the broadwing, which will be starting to come up now, they tend to have like a black outline of their wing. I don't know how we're doing for time. I won't get too into it, but we'll just do the shapes here. So they have the big wide wings and not that long tail, and they tend to soar and hover. Falcons are your merlin, your kestrel, and your peregrine. Oh, I do have slides on these, but they have very pointed wings because they are the fast dive bomb ones. So they have the pointed wings and a long tail for dive bombing. Now, sometimes the accipiters will point their wings to dive, and it makes it more challenging. But falcons always have that pointed wing, and they're the fast ones, not the chasing ones, the speed demons. The harriers, they also kind of have the wide wings. They have a long tail, but you tend to see them in open fields, and they they tend to hunt open fields, and they have a very obvious white rump. And they have an owl-like face, if you can see them. It's flat like an owl for catching sound. Turkey vultures, there were so many of them migrating today. They tend to fly in what's called a dihedral shape, so it's like an upside-down V, and they look like they're wobbling. They kind of fly like they're unsteady. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Next time you see, you'll be like, oh, I see what she means. We just get turkey vultures here. I mean, there's a chance that a black vulture might show up. I think one shows up maybe in Niagara, but I don't think there's ever been one reported in York. Osprey are your fishing birds. They look like a giant seagull, white with black, usually carrying a fish, and usually near fish, but I have seen them quite often in the forests. And the eagles. Couple of winters ago, the blue jays, it was near North Tract and Davis Drive, they were going nuts. I've never seen, I'm like, oh, maybe it's the goshawk. It was 5 bald eagles were there. So there was some deer had been hit or a kill or something. And the eagles were in there in the middle of winter. So I'm like, the last place I would expect to see 5 bald eagles, it was at Davis Drive Tract in the middle of winter. Of course, I eagerly grabbed everyone I could see. That was everyone. Look at the eagles. I think I scared some kids, but when they realized I was just trying to show them eagles, the parents were less apt to call the police. I was just really excited. Oh, you want to see small eagles? And they were just all perched and were feeding on. And the ravens were losing it, and the crows were losing it, and the blue jays. So they are around. Eagles will not get the full white head and white tail till about year 4. So if you see a giant bird, it's usually has a lot of white underneath. They have white armpits, white mottling, various stages of it. That's an immature bald eagle. Golden eagles come through only in migration. I've been fortunate to see a few, but usually they kind of go down the other side of the lake. So I've seen them quite a few times actually along Highway 9, heading out towards the 400. They're very big. The juveniles is usually what I see, and they're fairly dark, and they'll have a white band on their tail. They won't have the white armpits like the eagles, bald eagles do. It's just so cool to see a bald eagle. They're massive. So here's the bird on a wire. Always seem to be on a hydro wire. This is the kestrel, beautiful little bird, highest catch rate of all the hawks. They feed on a lot of insects, butterflies, moths, small things. They are cavity nesters, so some people put up boxes for them, and they tend to like those. Beautiful little birds, falcon. They've got that dark streak, and they would fly with the pointed wings. Their counterpart, but similar in size, is the merlin. If you have a merlin nesting, you will know because they are so loud. They're just a loud bird. They're not very big, and I think they're just trying to, I don't know, scare everything off. Very, very loud. Similar to the peregrine in the field sometimes. They have a bit of a mallard kind of cheek stripe, but heavy streaking on the breast, a lot smaller, more banding in the tail. And the peregrine, of course, it looks very obvious here, but when they're in the field, it's much different. We've got a female on the right and a male on the left who had just eaten, so you see that giant crop, which is kind of their throat. It's full of whatever it ate. I think this was in Toronto, so probably a pigeon. Actually, no, that was in Bradford. The one on the right was in Toronto. You can see he's banded, so I was able to actually read the bands on the photographs, report it, and found out where this bird came from. This is a daughter of something. These guys are recovering now. They were species at risk. I think they're starting to be delisted, either federal or provincial. But these are, the fastest flyer in the world. They've adapted well. The city areas, and they dive bomb and hit a bird with such impact that it kills them instantly, and they just fall out, and then they just go eat them. Which is great when, they're nesting somewhere in the financial district, and these suit men are walking along, and all of a sudden these dead pigeon falls in front of them, and then a falcon comes and grabs it. I find it cool, but I think people were a little turned off by it. Here's our broadwing hawk. So these guys are the ones coming back. They do nest locally in the forest. They're a buteo, the wide wings. They tend to have a black outline on them. They have a mottled chest. They say they're broadwing, but still they don't look any more broadwing than the other ones. So here's our classic red tail, and I put this picture in because this shows the features. You can see there's a dark belly band. So right across the belly is black. It can be black, it can be very, very faint, but there's a belly band. The shoulders, you can see the dark coming off the shoulders, and then at the, where is it? Here, you got black spots there, black band, and then this white bib. And those are the features, and they can be varying in coloration. But there's always a dark spot at the wrist, the shoulders, the belly band, and that white bib. They don't always have a red tail. As you can see with this one, it's a juvenile, so it's just got a banded tail, not the classic red tail. Now, to clear all this. Oh, they changed this. How do you clear it? There. There we go. Okay. And they're everywhere. They're the ones you see always at the side of the road. Okay, this is my really bad picture of a red-shouldered hawk because they're hard to get a picture of. But they were listed. They're recently been removed off the species at risk list. Yay! They like interior forest for nesting, and so that's a good sign that they're being delisted because interior forest is harder and harder to find. You can see they're a very dark bird. They're supposed to have crescents that you see at the wing edges. I see them in a lot of birds, so I still don't get that one. But very banded wings, dark body. They do have red shoulders, obviously, when you see them, and the banding of the tail. I think I put the right picture in. Yeah, here's a juvenile Coopers. I'm just going to quickly go through those. So this is juvenile, very streaky. One way of finding them is that their outside tail feathers are even with the inside. Sorry, no, they're not. Sorry, they're shorter than across the top. So they end early. So they're C-shaped almost. That's how I remember it, Coopers. Sharp shin, their outside feathers are as long as their middle. So when their tail's out, all of the feathers will be the same length from the underneath most of the time. And that's straight for sharp shin, SS. But there's, during molting that can change. If you're looking at from behind, you can't really see that. So it's a bit challenging to see. This is a Cooper's hawk, and I don't know if you can see it, but you can kind of see I can't see it because the closed captioning is on there. Maybe I can move it. You can see how their tail feathers at the bottom don't go all the way to the edge. The Sharpies, those ones would be as long as the ones in the middle. These guys tend to have a cape, so a flatter head. They tend to be bulkier. They have a cap, doesn't extend all the way down, where the Sharpie has what's like a hood. I think I got that right. And the Sharpies tend to be more tubular and longer as well, but it's really hard to tell, and I keep forgetting which one's which. They also, when you start birding enough, you get what's called the gist, which is a general impression, size, and shape. And you can't describe, you just know that's a Cooper's, or you just know that's a Sharpie. So if you hear someone say you look at the gist, that's what they're talking about. It's nothing else. General impression, size, and shape. This is the cool one. This is the goshawk. Beautiful white eye stripe, dark, like gray. They're almost gray and black. Juveniles, not so much. They're just beasts. I don't even know how to describe them. They're just so exciting, and they have really cool wavy tail bands. I was standing in the forest. This was actually at North Tract. I was taking a picture of a mourning dove to check my camera, and all of a sudden, all the birds disappeared, like gone, and in flies this guy. And he just hunted for a little bit, and I just stood there shaking. Don't scream this time, Aileen. Don't scream. But I was so excited. I just took pictures, and I was like trying so hard to control it because it was so cool. Flew right over my head, landed on a branch. I saw him take a poop. I was so excited about that because it was a goshawk. I saw him like chasing birds. It was amazing. One of my favorite experiences. I can't remember why I put this picture in. Oh, it's just, sorry, I know why. It's showing you a very bad picture of an accipiter and a buteo. So you can kind of see the difference in the tail and the wings versus the wide wings of the buteo, which is the one on the bottom right. And that Yeah. And then the top right. So it's a bit of a two, comparing the two together. If that makes sense. Here's the bald eagles that I saw at North Tract, and it was snowing quite a bit, which is why it looks blurry. So you can see the juvenile, or the immature on the right, and the mature on the left with the classic whitehead. Right, owls, we're wrapping up, but quickly, everyone loves to see owls, but they're really hard to find. Please don't harass them. These are probably the most harassed ones out there. Don't share locations if you know of a nest, because there are some people out there that just do really stupid things. Like they will cut down branches, they will put ladders, climb right up, and get right at the nest to get pictures of the babies. If the babies fledge, they'll like pick them up and put them on, like they'll take pictures. Like it's awful, the stories. So don't share owl locations, please. So up in the top left, I've never found one in the York Region Forest. I'm actually heading out, I think Thursday or Friday night, to do screech owl surveys to try and find one in my patch. They are the most common ones. They're in downtown. Like they're very little. They're very well camouflaged. Screech owls. Top right are two long-eared owls. They are really hard to find. They look a lot like a great horned owl, but they're about a third of the size. And they are colony roosters. Sometimes you'll see like multiple in a tree, which was when I saw these guys. This is the only time I've seen one in the wild. I've heard them multiple times at the forest. They do like a cat howl when they get spooked, but otherwise, being social, they don't declare territory. So they have a very simple, straight "woo." Was it? Did I hear that? I don't know. Like it's very, so they're really hard to find. But when they flush, and they flush really easily, like you're not even near them, they do like a weird cat cry thing, like a howl. The guy which I showed you before is the barred owl, and their classic "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" I have done hundreds of night hikes in the York Region Forest. I know there are breeding barred owls there. I have heard them calling 3 times. So they're not, it's not like the movies. The guy on the right, he's the one that'll eat all the other owls. This is the great horned owl. He's got the long ears, and he's got what's called the tuxedo. He's got the white bow tie on the neck. Very big, and he will eat anything really that he can. The impact of their talons has such force that they can actually decapitate things. So they will take something out and just decapitate it and then sit and eat it. They eat skunks because they have no sense of smell. So if you ever see a half-eaten skunk in a tree, it's probably a great horned owl who's done that. He will eat the barred owl. He will eat all the other owls if he can. Rabbits, small dogs, cats, chickens. A lot of people blame things like foxes and coyotes on the chickens when the great horned owl is the one doing it at night, and they just don't know. Or raccoons are another one. The little guy on the bottom left is a teeny little owl. This is the northern saw-whet owl. They say if you want to find one of these guys, look for a beer can in a tree, because that's about the size of it. They tend to roost between like 5 and 15 feet, so they're usually at eye level. But the problem is they're so cute. They will sit still, and people assume that means they're not afraid of you. The fact is that they're usually in fear, but they're like, if I fly, I'm more likely to get killed by a raptor or attacked by crows or whatever, and crows will kill them and eat them. So their choice is die by this weird looking human staring at me or die by flying. And it's a very stressful decision. And if they actually do fly, they usually won't, because they're kind of thinking they're camouflaged, but they're still terrified. They usually don't make it. Unfortunately, these guys, there was one recently, or a couple of years ago at Downsview Park, was so harassed that it ended up dying of a stress-related illness from being harassed constantly. So super cute. If you do come across one, take a look, snap a quick picture if you need to, and get the heck out of there. Yeah, that's all I'll say about that. All right, a few other ones. Oh, I do have nuthatches. You got the kingfisher. I actually walking through North Tract in January one year and had a kingfisher fly over, which is another spot it shouldn't be, but it was there. Green herons, there was some at the Davis Drive tract until the dogs got there, and I don't think they're there anymore. Turkey vultures everywhere. Wild turkeys are now making quite the comeback to the point where they're actually becoming problematic. We've also got, these are some of the finches. You've got your rose-breasted grosbeak. They're back. As my friend said, oh, the ones that look like they had their throat slit. Thank you, because now that's all I see when I look at them. They'll be back soon. Beautiful birds, like to adapt to feeders. Bottom left are evening grosbeak, species at risk. Beautiful yellow birds, typically down here only in the winter or in migration. And same with the guy at the top left, which is the white-winged crossbill. There are these guys, red-winged crossbills. They're associated with winter. However, the red ones I have found the last 4 or 5 years in the spring, and they are nesting at North Tract, or they were, and they were there constantly. But they're very unpredictable. They can breed any time of year, any location. They don't migrate north-south. They just move around where the food is. They'll have babies in January if it works. They'll have babies in September if it works. But they definitely were breeding in York, but I didn't have the evidence. I found the fledglings after they were too long to count. But they can be around any time. The ones on the left. To see the white wings. Oh, that was a pine grosbeak. Sorry, the other one's pine grosbeak, not white wing. The pinky ones here are the white wing crossbills. They're usually just down for the winter and only in certain years. All right, Bohemian waxwings, occasional, white horse house wrens everywhere, loud, chattering. They'll yell at you. The little birds are always the worst. Hummingbirds are jerks, I tell you. I've been hit in the head by them. The little ones are always the ones you got to watch out for. I'm short, just so you know. The beautiful scarlet tanager, they are breeding quite a few places in North Track. Same with the indigo bunting down below. Different habitats, but they're both beautiful birds. Scarlet tanager is way up high, so the best chance to see them is in migration. Indigo buntings, if the light's not on them right, they just look like a black bird, but they are, I think, in every York Region forest, usually around an edge area. Cedar waxwings are just all over. They come and go. They're sometimes around in the winter. They're in flocks. They do breed. Neat little birds. You've got the cuckoos, common nighthawk up in the top right, a threatened species. They come out at night. Meadowlark, bobolink, which they were both at Happy Valley, but their bobolinks aren't there anymore. Same with Bender Graves. As soon as they plant trees, bobolinks are out of there. They're grassland specialists. And down at the bottom left is the only whippoorwill I've ever seen in York Region. They used to be common. Unfortunately, they're another one that's been escalated on the species at risk as a nighttime insectivore. All the moths, people hate caterpillars. They hate moths. They kill them, and this is their main diet. So they're whippoorwill. You know, if you heard one when you're a kid, you probably haven't heard one in a while. So lots of other cool birds. This is just a very quick, I could talk all night. The best thing is when you're out bird watching, you get to see super cool stuff like this too. These otters were at North Tract, like in a pond that's now been dismantled because it was a beaver dam. So cool to see them. I love river otters. The blurry bottom picture, I was at Davis Drive Track, and a short Towhee ran across, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one, and a whole family of 5. And I was, again, one of those, don't scream, Aileen, but I really wanted to scream. The fox den I found probably about 10 years ago at a field next door. Again, shot with a very, very long lens. Coyotes, oh, they're amazing. They usually see you and run. And deer, that was cool to see. So, quickly, how to get started. Binoculars, anything's better than squinting, or I started with my big camera. Merlin app, Sibley books, field guides, eBird if you feel confident and you want to start posting and contributing. If you can get a picture and upload it, iNat will help you ID. Same with Merlin, it'll ID pictures and sounds. And find a birder that wants to go out with you and start learning. It's a really good way to waste time. Birding for everyone. So this is just a little page to try and encourage diversity in birding, because for the longest time it was very obvious old white man, they called it. But there's a lot more females getting involved, which is fantastic. I started a local female birding club, and we were I got busy and haven't kept up on it, but we were going out on little hikes and stuff. We have the 2 Pride, the walk and the talk with Maxwell. There's the feminist bird club, Maxwell. There's a few other ones. But you know, the birds are diverse. We should be too, just like people around. You've been warned. This is what can happen. This picture was taken of it was in England. It was a red-winged blackbird, which are everywhere. And one showed up there, and this is the craze because they're like, "Oh, it's a rare bird! It's a rare bird!" And all these people are showing up to see this one little lost red-winged blackbird. So you know, rarities are funny because if they're everywhere, you don't appreciate them. If one shows up and it's not common, it's insane. But you've been warned. It's a great way to waste time. So go get birding. All right.
Thank you so much for the presentation. You did a great job of conveying your enthusiasm and your knowledge. And yeah, I think if there's anybody watching tonight who hasn't done much birding in their life, that you've done a great job of selling it, the hobby, and which is, as you said, is something that we birders are always trying to do is rope new people into this.
Yep.
Does anybody have any questions for Aileen? You can throw them in the chat if you like. And we'll I'll pass them along.
Goshawk knocked a basketball cap. I would love to have a goshawk knock a baseball cap off my head. I almost had a Cooper's hawk fly into my face, and it kind of skidded, and I thought, hey, that'll be the best scar ever. What happened to what's that scar from? A Cooper's hawk flew into my face.
Yeah, you can start a list of all the birds that have attacked you, all the red-winged blackbirds,
Yeah,
swans,
so
and
far
things.
just been yellow warblers, hummingbirds hit me in the head. Wild turkey flew at me once.
Oh,
That was a
how
whole
big?
hot mess, let me tell you.
Yeah, it would be
I
intimidating
quickly
there.
looked around. I hope no one saw that.
Yeah.
Just like every time a rough grouse flies, even though I know there's one in that area, I scream and yell profanities and then look around like hoping there's no children. And
Yeah,
those
that always
super
shocks
rough
me.
grouse get me every time. Butts and beers, yeah, that's right.
Well, I don't see any questions, so
Great.
um, maybe we'll call it an evening. But yeah, thank you
Yeah,
so much for joining us, and everybody get out there and enjoy birding. This is the
yeah.
best time of the year to go out there and do it. The next few weeks are
Yeah.
when migration really picks up, and you see
Is
the
anyone going on Saturday?
yeah, it's
Yep.
going to be
Okay.
fun. I'll
I
make
have
sure.
to get someone to fill in, unfortunately. I will be there. Maxwell will be there, and they're great. And another really good birder will be there to lead you. Unfortunately, I have some personal. I got to get my mom packed up and moved into a home, so mommy takes priority. But you guys will have a great time, and Nobleton Track's really cool because you get a variety of habitats. And being a bitterly, you'll get hopefully the swallows and the sparrows will be back, so you'll get to see some of those.
Amazing. All right. Well, good night, everyone, and we'll hope to see you all on Saturday morning.
Go
Okay.
birds!